My man! Welcome to the show. How are you? Really excited as a parent and as a person of color to have our guest today. Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey, guys, what's up? It's Irfan Joffrey, and this is the SunnySide Up podcast. Goes out to about 30,000 people, and I'm excited that we've been able to grow our audience in such a short period of time, and that is in no small part due to the caliber of guests which I am absolutely honored to be able to have, humbled every single time. Today I want to introduce everyone to Mr. Will Weed, who is a friend and CEO of Robert Weed Corp out of Indiana, Elkhart, Indiana, which is the RV capital of the world. One of the things that I absolutely love about you, Will, is that so we both enjoy food. Okay. I'm not sure how else to say that. And when I was visiting Elkhart, Indiana for the very first time, number one, I had completely forgotten that there is a time change. So I drive from Chicago to Indiana, and there's this 1 hour time change, and I get there, and Will is at the table so polite, like it wasn't a big deal, and I felt so horrible. But that was the first time you and I shared a meal, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And since then, we've had the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better, and I just admire you as a person, and you're one of the most down-to-earth people I know. So thank you for being on our podcast.
Yeah, certainly. Irfan, thanks for having me. Appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I got my Chicago White Sox on today, so I'm your direction on the time change this afternoon.
I noticed that. I noticed that you've got some family here in Chicago as well, so that's pretty cool. So listen, I want to get into what you do, what Robert Weed does as a company for those folks who are not familiar with Robert Weed, or folks that are not familiar with Elkhart, Indiana. Now, in your neck of the woods and in other parts of the globe, everyone knows who you are. So explain maybe a little bit about, first off, what Robert Weed does and how you guys started.
Yeah, sure. We started 67 years ago. My grandfather, so family-owned business, third generation. My grandfather was selling raw plywood out of a station wagon from Akron, Ohio, which was put on the map by LeBron James since then, and kind of saw this thing happening in Elkhart, which originally was manufactured housing and like cargo utility trailers, and after that came recreational vehicles. So he set up shop in Elkhart, and then we bought property in Bristol, Indiana. My father came in, grew the organization over time, and we transitioned from 100% wholesale distribution to a lot more value-added manufacturing plugged into the organization. And then enter me, grew up in this business, 14 years old, grew up in the industry. So I got to watch the market mature for sure and grow, but also see a lot of the challenges and issues as I worked through them when I was in production, all the way through, customer experience, customer service, all the way into leadership roles. That's kind of what drives me. Is it's a great industry, but ripe with opportunity for improvement, for change, for growth, for collaboration and partnerships. I love bringing people from outside of Elkhart kind of into it to learn and see what that looks like and the challenges that we have, and hopefully bringing some of that outside perspective into the industry and into the markets that we serve is helpful as well. So recreational vehicle is a big part of what we do, but again, cargo utility trailers, so like the partitions and a UPS, USPS, Frito-Lay truck, you name it, Cintas truck. We do casket, industrial, kitchen and bath, cabinet components, things like that. So anything kind of wood products and plastic products related.
Wow. All right. There's a lot to unpack there. So first off, I'm envisioning you at 14 years old going into the office with your, I think, was it your father at the time who was running the company?
Robert actually still would have been running it at that point, but yeah.
One of the things that struck me when I first met you, outside of the fact that we both like delicious cuisine, was you have a maturity well beyond your years, right? When I had heard about you, I thought it was like, oh, okay, he must be like, someone in his 50s. And then I meet you and you're like 20 years younger than that, more than 20 years younger than that. And so do you think by virtue of you coming into the shop and you guys have it's a big business for you, those of you guys who don't know Robert Weed, if you go into Elkhart, Indiana, number one, everyone knows who they are, and they've got a lot of land, hundreds of thousands of square feet, and they've got an operation in Idaho as well. And I just can't imagine two things. Number one, being thrown into that environment at a young age where you're seeing people on the factory floor and in the executive offices, and thinking to myself, if I was you, like, gosh, okay, I'm going to be running this. Did you always kind of know that this is what you wanted to do? Were you like, no, I'm going to go do something else? Not only, okay, so that's one major question. Now, before I forget, the other question, one of the things I've always wondered is at such a young age, what kind of pressure is that to deal with? I would imagine it's not easy. I certainly couldn't do it. So I'd love for you to speak on both of those things.
Yeah, so I'm 36. I actually jumped into a leadership role around 26 years old. So just about 10 years now, everything from sales leadership to just kind of a generic executive VP type situation. But yeah, I started at 14, literally walking around the company with like a clipboard or some type of notepad in my hand, just kind of mapping out the facilities, documenting where things were, kind of like an IT role, right? And yeah, I grew up with these folks, right? So we're anywhere, depends on industry and industry health, but anywhere from 200 to 400 employees. This market, Elkhart County, tends to flex a lot, and so as you get as large as 400 employees, and you've grown up with these folks, and most of them by name, if not all of them, and there's 3 and 4 generations out there. I guess I've always seen that as a responsibility. I get asked the question all the time, like, "Hey, Will, did you always know if you were going to run it?" That always seemed to be in my path forward, and I guess I never felt otherwise. So, but you kind of build this bond and relationship with the team members over that time, as you're literally sweeping the floors with them, or cleaning out glue barrels, or feeding boards into a line. You kind of create this relationship and this sense of responsibility to make sure that you and the organization are making the right decisions for success and long-term health of our team members. And again, that's really kind of what drives me, is creating sustainability in the markets we serve with our customers. But really, as important or even more important, is how do we keep these folks employed? How do we keep them happy? How do we skill them up? And the way I always say it is, transition from laborers to engineers and technicians, right? So they work fewer hours, their bodies are healthier, they can take better care of their families, they're paid better. Those are the kind of things that drive me. So yeah, I definitely feel a responsibility. Certainly at 18 years old, right? There's nights I go to sleep, I'm like, how on earth does this company make money? How are we running the day to day? I mean, I was always kind of thinking in that capacity, in that way, and more importantly to me, but how do we grow it and make it better? So I got to audit a lot of leadership meetings, a lot of different types of functional meetings at a young age. I think it hopefully made schooling a little more applicable for me as I was going through that stage, and hopefully put me in a good spot for success, and a good opportunity to do what it is I want to do here. But yeah, it's important to me. My last name is on the building, and these are people where in a lot of cases went to high school with their kids, right? That I'm working with today. So very important to me to get this right, and do this well.
Look, that's a really important distinction, isn't it? When you talk about cleaning out glue baskets, or I don't know the terminology, I'm sorry, or going through and sweeping up the shop floor and those kinds of things, I think that contributes to your leadership style, because I've been to Elkhart, and I'm not, not to take anything away from anybody else, but I've seen Ferraris there. I've seen big fancy Rolls Royces. I've seen people driving around like they're celebrities. And again, everyone has their own style. I'm not disrespecting one or another, but what struck me about you was that you are down to earth to a fault. If I met you, I would not have, somebody said, "Oh yeah, that's Will Weed," da 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 da. I wouldn't, immediately think that, okay, this is not a guy who's out there, with all kinds of swagger and all the pretentiousness of some folks. Do you think that was something that was inculcated into you from previous generations of leaders at Robert Weed, or do you think it's more of just the virtue of being on the shop floor and working with the rank and file folks that contribute to your success? Is that something that's sort of ingrained in you, how you not only lead, but how you approach your responsibility? And it's a big responsibility.
Yeah, I think a combination of those two things, and one more I'll add is, Elkhart County was founded by the market that we know today, was founded by a lot of great people as well. So there's certainly good leadership ingrained into the DNA of Elkhart County. Philanthropy, giving back, sense of community, taking care of community. Those are things that I've watched for a long time here. A lot of privately owned organizations, family owned organizations. That dynamic has changed a little bit over the last 10 years, and really since the 08, 09 financial crisis. But that foundation was kind of tried and true. So, I grew up going to charitable events and nonprofit work and auctions and volunteering. And I watched other great families do that as well. So, yeah, I think a combination of those. My father raised me. If I wanted a pack of baseball cards, I think I got like 1 cent a weed or something, right? So I need to go pull 3,000 weeds to go get a pack of baseball cards or something like that. Paid for my first car, things like that. So always kind of had that work ethic. I'm a planner, I'm a forecaster. So, I could sit there and tell you how many years it's going to take me to get my first car if I worked at this rate or this many hours. And I'm appreciative of that, because I think that's a big part of kind of how I was built. And then, yeah, I mean, Robert was very generous and very much the patriarch of the family. And, he passed away in July of 2007, but certainly stemmed from him. And then, yeah, 100% being on the shop floor and working with folks, and running the night shift out there, and just kind of seeing what life is really all about. And really, I did a lot of that before I even went off to school. Right, starting at 18, I think 19 was my night shift summer, which was, you don't see your friends all week, then you try and pivot for one day, and then you pivot right back to starting at 2:30 p.m. on a Monday for night shifts. So I think those experiences are all very important. Talk about this a lot, but kids going off to school, going off to college. I wish folks would work for 2 years, right, and pay some bills, have an apartment, figure life out a little bit. And I certainly didn't have it all figured out, and I didn't wait the 2 years either. But I think all those experiences are important.
Super insightful, and it also gives color into who you are a little bit. There's so many layers of, the more I get to know you, of your leadership style and the nuances of how you run your business and how you address the responsibilities that you have. I mean, I walk through the shop floor with you, and there's people that are genuinely happy to see you. They wave, they smile, you talk to them about their families. Now, I can tell when somebody's faking it and not faking it, and they're definitely not faking it. So that's really, really cool to be able to see such a genuine genuine regard from both sides. And I think that makes for a stronger culture. I want to shift gears a little bit. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions that people have about you? Now, before you answer that question, specifically the folks that are in the shop, right? And then at the executive level, right? And I want to dig into that a little bit more if you'll allow me to. But first, why don't we take on those two components?
Yeah, so I lead very, very differently from the way my father led, and I'm sure that's different from the way Robert led. We talked about, Robert Weed being a big organization, but the way I see it in the grand scheme of things in the world is we're a small organization, and my goals to grow the business, diversify the business. And the way I put this is I want our company to operate like a Fortune 500 organization, all that sophistication that comes along with that type of business, but also maintain the good pieces of culture that a family owned company can have, or a privately held company can have. Those things are important to me. So I intentionally lead different. It is not my goal to micromanage. I watched my father own a lot of the decision making. And while at that time in our business that was okay, it makes it very difficult for us to scale the organization as we move forward. So I intentionally step away from some of those decision makings, or I ask maybe different questions that were asked in the past to help us arrive at good, healthy decisions, through conversation and collaboration. And data and analytics versus gut feel. I've done this for 40 years, and this is the way I've always done it. I am very intentional about not jumping into people's decision making processes intentionally, and kind of commandeering that, and kind of interjecting the answer. That's really important to me. So I watched that kind of command and control, three people running the organization. And because of that, I watched us struggle to kind of scale and break a couple of glass ceilings along the way. So I would argue that that is, I think, what people could probably know about me personally from internal to our organization. Folks outside of our business, I'm a perfectionist for sure.
I know that.
Always chasing perfection. I'm OCD, right? So my desk is always organized and clean. My text messages are my to-do list. If they're not swiped off, that means there's a reason they're still there. But I'm a lost opportunity person. I think there's a question on here for maybe later, Irfan, of what keeps you up at night. Lost opportunity keeps me up at night. And when you look at our market, you see venture capital dollars and private equity and other different types of organizations entering or getting excited about us. They're not here because we've done it this way for 50 years. They're here because there's tremendous opportunity in front of us to improve and be different, improve the customer experience, improve the end user experience, and really improve the experience for our team members and our really great community of workforce here in Elkhart County. I do like to be disruptive. I do like to drive change. I do like to push hard. I have high expectations of myself, high expectations of our team, and frankly, high expectations of our community in Elkhart County to continue to do this well, but also find the ways to do it better. So you had said earlier, respectfully, and I mean that as well. There's a lot of great people in Elkhart County, a lot of great entrepreneurs, a lot of great business people. And we've made a lot of money doing it this way for a long, long time in Elkhart. But my argument would be we're having a hard time scaling the industry. We're exhausting our workforce. I think in 2017 or 19, we had about 15,000 open jobs. Through COVID, we probably had 27,000 open jobs. It's been a big strain on Elkhart County and the people that kind of make this market and county click and make them work. So I guess that's the one thing I wish people would look at me a little bit differently. Is it's not that I'm being disrespectful or intentionally rubbing the wrong buttons. Right, I'm here to encourage change and be a part of that. And I think it's inevitable. I think leadership is always going to be looking for retirement or that next opportunity. I think those things are close in time right now as well. So I think I want to be prepared and ready for kind of some wholesale change in our market and encourage folks to do the same.
Got it. And do you mean specific to bringing in resources and leadership candidates from outside of Elkhart? Is that specifically what you meant?
I think across the board, talent acquisition, people with different perspective and backgrounds and experiences that can kind of help us be catalysts to industry improvement, how we source product and bring it in, whether that's China, Indonesia, or the Pacific Northwest. Our approach to quality and, like I said before, kind of end user experience. A lot of articles out there about that, and in many industries, right? But I think in totality, right, the kind of the entire approach to the market and the opportunity that we have at hand, every single step along the way, whether you call that step in the supply chain or step in the recruiting process and who we bring in here, or step on the way to end user satisfaction, every single stone has significant opportunity for improvement and therefore, frankly, more profitability for each one of our organizations. So it's a ton of profit left on the table in the market.
Yeah,
And
got it.
I'd love to capture that.
Got it. That's helpful to know. A little bit of a personal question, and you may not feel comfortable answering that. And if you don't, that's fine. Do you ever feel that you've got an arrow on your back? Because, and let me paint the picture. I hire a lot of people here at Roosterly. I don't do the day-to-day hiring. We're at about 50 people or so, 48, 50 people. There's been instances when I've hired someone, right, who has, I get the vibe from them that they're almost like gunning for my job, number one, or they feel like they can do it better, right? Especially, I'm not going to get into details, but I hired somebody who's relatively young, who's lots of energy, interviewed really well, but down the road they wanted all these promotions, and they were telling me about things that I should be doing, or things that I'm not good at. I'm like, last I checked, I'm the one who signs your paycheck. That's just me, though. I don't have the heritage of third generation family owned business. I'm the one who's running it. You've got a lot bigger organization. Do you ever feel like the folks that you put in to a leadership position are either disloyal, disrespectful, or have ulterior motives, and feel like, hey, this is a young CEO. I've been in this business for 40 years. Screw this guy. I'm going to really show him. And how do you, because that to me is like such a betrayal when I see anything like that on a small. I'm not. I don't mean to get into this big whole Hunger Games conversation, but I think it is worth just sharing a little bit if you feel comfortable about those kinds of situations and how you've dealt with them. Because you're the type of person I feel that you notice everything. Nothing gets by you. You may not necessarily say something, but I know you pick up on everything. Talk to me a little bit about that. I've been wanting to ask you that question since the day I met you.
Yeah, interesting question. I do not go to bed at night thinking about that. That isn't one of the things that really keeps me up. If I felt that way from time to time, yeah, I don't think often, but certainly, I think I get that feeling more from an external perspective, right? Okay, so Will Weed's in this role, he's taking the company over. Now he's, bought his father out. He's young, he's 36, he was 26 when he started taking over, et cetera, et cetera. So I think externally, I feel more that is used against me sometimes versus internally. You know me, Irfan. You said it earlier, to a fault probably, especially when I interview. I am very, very honest and transparent about our business, where we're going, my vision, how particular I am when it comes to my leadership style, high expectations, et cetera, et cetera. And, I usually have a 90-minute interview with somebody, and I probably spend 60 of those 90 minutes talking myself, just saying, here's where it's at. Let me put it all on the table. I don't want to sugarcoat the entire opportunity for you, right? There's a lot of challenges to overcome as well. When you want to be a change agent in a market that's done it the same way for 40 plus years, those aren't easy things. So I think through that candid interview process, I think I instill some of that respect and honesty and transparency back and forth from the get go, and that's certainly the point. It's interesting. There's a lot of parts of owning a family owned business that nobody wants anything to deal with either. So as you start to peel some of those layers back, and you start talking about minority shareholders and what people think you should do versus what you're not doing, and have to be in control of, are we giving money out or are we not giving that money out? Upset family members and things of that nature. I think those are things that sometimes people take a look at and like, wow, I don't really want anything to do with that. So maybe don't want that role or that position. And I think that comes with all leaders with all types of businesses. But I honestly, I don't. That's not what keeps me up at night. I don't feel like people inside my organization, our organization, are out to get me or try and get my spot. Certainly, people think they can do it better than me. I think people feel like I make mistakes from time to time by not getting involved. And my goal is to let people learn through experiences, make mistakes, improve the process, be able to replicate the process. I don't run around with a stick and beating people for making mistakes, right? I'd rather have people own a decision and own a process and improve it from there. So that would probably be the biggest one. Is I think people wish I would interject myself from time to time or more often on some of the smaller tasks or challenges at hand. And again, back to my leadership style, I refuse to do it. There's one of me and there's 400 of us, and for me, it's all about scaling our business. So
I love it. I think the term for it is giving folks all the rope they need to hang themselves. I don't mean that in a negative way. But the great thing about that is, like, instead of getting into situations where one person says something, the other person says no, no, I would have had the right idea if Will didn't step in. But you're like, okay, I'll give you full ownership, and you own the result, bad or good, right? And that's really where somebody can prove their worth. to you and the organization, right? Because if they do well, they'll get a promotion, the company will do well, everybody wins. So I think that is a wise leadership style to choose in those particular situations. And for those who don't know the dynamics of your business and the community, that is not common. So I think that's a rather innovative approach, because a lot of those companies, as you mentioned earlier, in terms of how previous generations ran it, it was very much a micromanagement, my way or the highway, I'm the boss kind of a situation, where you're much more inclusive, much more community oriented. I think that's those components also are reflected in your branding, so it's consistent all the way through. And I think in my conversations with you, you've emulated that. You're like a walking, talking example of the characteristics or traits that you espouse, and that is not common. There's this flavor of the month leadership style. I think companies will be like, yeah, this is what we're about, but you actually look at the organization and you look at the leadership, and they could care less. Years ago, I worked for a startup right out of college. This was in Southern California, and it was about a 400 employee company, and the CEO and the VP and the all the senior leadership would talk about how they've got to conserve cash. And this was sort of the dot-com ending of the dot-com bubble. Meanwhile, if you take a look at how these guys were operating, the one guy would come to work in a chauffeur driven bulletproof SUV. The other guy would fly back and forth from Denver into Southern California just to make an appearance and leave. But they're talking about, we're all in this together kind of a vibe. And like all the senior members of the company are just literally plundering the resources. The stock at the time of this company was trading for, I don't know, $4 or something ridiculous for the size of company they were. And the market and the employees were just looking at these knuckleheads like, you guys are literally ripping us off, doing an injustice with the employees, being disingenuous, saying one thing and clearly not living those values. Ever since then, as I sort of began to grow in my career, that was almost number one, a cautionary tale that also made me very, what's the word, jaded around how certain cultures and companies operate. But in conversations that I've had with other folks about you and about Robert Weed, I always say, like, these guys got their stuff together. Like, they're always so consistent. Now, I mean, there might be little nuances behind the scenes that happen at every company. That's okay. But it happens everywhere, in every family, even on a personal level, right? But in general, it's really cool that you've been able to build that type of a culture, vibe, espouse those types of qualities. That's really, really cool. So a couple of things, like, look, I'm a marketer. This is what we do. We've got 2,500 individual small business clients. So I've always got to ask you about marketing. How do you use digital marketing to grow your brand, grow your sales? And I've got to ask, what's been your experience like working with Roosterly? This is a self-interest, self-serving question.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, 4 years ago it was non-existent, right? Whether it was marketing or digital marketing, we thought marketing was maybe a brand on a bundle of plywood or a homepage on the internet or something like that. So we really had a poor grasp of what marketing was, and it really took a dedicated effort to kind of take a step back and say, okay, we're going to work with good partners to make sure that we can build this out and build it out in a meaningful way, tied into our sales approach as an organization as well. So when I took this organization over, and even before that, we were a very transactional business. So we're going to go in, we're going to drop a quote off, we're probably going to go somewhere and cross our fingers and hope it comes to fruition, and off we go. And that all had to be overhauled. So when you think about it, and you think about consultative selling and good strategic partners, and we know supply chain, and we know quality, and we know our customers, and we know the market where it's heading. and how do we collaborate around that. Really needed to step our game up in all facets of marketing and brand exposure, and we have a lot of exciting plans, that we haven't even enacted on at this point, that as we continue to move forward, we'll start rolling those different things out. But I think helping us be intentional was a big part of that. We gathered a pretty good group of folks over the years, over the last 2.5, 3 years, that in some cases are more effective than others, as we're learning and kind of growing through this journey as well. But in all cases, I think that intentionality and really embarking down that journey of just marketing in general was a big win for us. There's been a couple challenges over the last 2 years that we've needed to kind of control our narrative, and you've helped with that, and that was critical and that was important as well. We know our business. Not sure anybody's welcome to pick the phone up and call me and ask me about it, but in lieu of that, right, we'll start sharing a little bit more about who we are. And look, the foundation of that, again, leadership styles. My father ran the business as we're privately held. We don't have to share anything with anybody, and we won't. And I just don't think that's a right way to go into the future at this point. So we're privately held, but we're going to be your most transparent strategic partner, right? Because I think that the more we can share earlier and frequently, the better we're probably going to maneuver through challenges and execute on those things. So even things like, our market intelligence report, where we're talking about the health of the current supply chain, wood indices, things like that. Those are all things, again, that without kind of embarking down this journey and kind of digital marketing journey, we wouldn't be sharing. We get calls from all the major banks. They want to hear about our market intelligence. The beauty of that is we're privately held, right? So I'll give you the privately held story of what I think is happening in Elkhart, Indiana, and then you can go get the publicly held story, and you can figure out where to meet in the middle on what's going on. So I think it's turned open a lot of doors for us as well. Everything from private equity and presenting down at Raymond James conferences and things like that.
Yeah.
A lot of these opportunities that we've created over the last 3-4 years have been 100% out of this effort. So it's been great.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me as I think about this shift towards transparency and the market intelligence report and other data that you guys are disseminating and presenting from a position of thought leadership is that you're setting the tone for other companies in the area. Look, you guys have been operating this way with mixed results at best. What we're here to do is be a steward of the community, set the tone, be a responsible organization here and say, hey, look, this is what we see happening. You can gain insights from the work that we're doing. We're sharing them with you. A rising tide will lift all boats. Would you agree that that's sort of the general philosophy that you espouse?
I know it's not as simple as you and I are going to lay it out, but it's like giving back to the community. I don't really need an ROI to know it's the right thing to do and a good thing to do. I feel very similarly about the collaboration and transparency that I'm trying to build with our strategic partners, customers, vendors, service providers alike. I know it's the right direction to head, the right thing to do, and 100% as we start doing some of these things differently. Again, I'm not going to say better; just a lot has changed in the last 10 years, right? And I think there's a lot more that's going to change in the next couple of years. The world is an uncertain and ever-changing place, so I believe wholeheartedly more transparency and collaboration, everybody will be more profitable at the end of the day, whether that's a business entity or an individual making more money, you name it. To me, it is a no-brainer. It is as simple as that. I know everybody doesn't think the way I do or process the way I do, and that's probably a good thing as well. But yeah, 100%. We collaborate and work together and share information and share opportunity. We can do a lot of good things.
Yeah, you're wise beyond your years. I'm sure you've heard that multiple times before. We're about the same. We're not that different in age, but so I feel a little bit weird saying that. But I just that's the vibe that I get from you. You're very much an old soul, if I can say that. We only have a few more minutes left. There's a couple questions that I want to get to. What are some of the biggest changes that you see happening in your industry, in Robert Weed specifically, over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, every industry I'm in right now, from recreational vehicle to multifamily construction, quality is and is going to continue to be a huge issue. I've got so many opportunities right now, even in non-traditional markets, solely based on the fact of I've always bought through this supply chain process. And now my leadership or our leadership is saying, do whatever you have to do, even if that's going directly to the source or to improve or solve or just have more control on the quality component. So I think we've built our company over the last 4 years and really 57 years around quality, around service, now around collaboration and transparency. So I think that bodes us very well, but excited for that. And then, anybody that reads, we see where the digital component of all of our business is going. Data and analytics, AI, all of those things have been talked about for a while, but are moving quicker and quicker every day. There's a lot of human error in the wood and plastic components industries that we work within. A lot of old school ways of doing things, right? So fat fingers, things like that. I think one of the next things too is ease of doing business. I mean, how can I make it super easy for one of our customers to log onto a portal, place the same order they place every single week with us, or tweak it up or down, plus or minus 10%, or whatever the market's doing today, right? So that boom, it's done. Somebody can approve it. Somebody else can approve it. You can see where your truck is. It's the next stop, and it's on County Road 31, and you're on County Road 35. I mean, I think that ease of doing business and the technology around that gets me pretty excited because I think it makes life better and life easier for everybody. And as I've said before, as you talk about automation, and I know there's always a fear around this.
Yeah.
We had 17,000 open jobs in 19. We had 25,000 open jobs in COVID. Jobs aren't going anywhere, right? There's going to be plenty of opportunity. I just think it's processing and working in ultimately a different way. So probably those two things: quality and then just the technology around how we interact with our strategic customers and vendors are, I think, coming very quickly.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there a book that has had an impact on your life that you would recommend to others? If so, what is it and why do you like it?
It's funny. I saw this on there. It's like I've really been working hard lately to read a little bit more for pleasure and a little less all the business jargon. There's Strategy Beyond the Hockey Stick, which was an interesting but pretty meaty and chewy read. I think the one for me that always sticks out, and it's been a while since I've read it, is Necessary Endings. And I can't remember who wrote that book, but it was actually recommended to me. We were down the process of not doing business with a long-term strategic customer. And so that was part of it. And then, I lost my mother, my wife lost her father, just all kinds of challenges in the world. And sometimes you just need to step away, reset, reboot, let everybody figure everything out. Sometimes that's going to be together in the future, and maybe it won't be in the future. But that was probably a big one for me, just because I had a lot to accomplish over the last 4 years to kind of get this thing. I don't want to say turned around, but going in the direction that I wanted it to go in. And lost some friends as employees, lost some long-term employees that just weren't aligned to the direction I was heading. You talk about consultative selling versus just dropping a quote off, things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of loss over that time period, personal and professional. And I think anybody that's ramping up some major change, that's not necessarily a bad one to take a quick read through. Just kind of insightful from that perspective. But
What
there's
was
so
that
many.
title?
I should show you my wall over here because, as you know, there's so many good ones out there. But
What was that title again? If you could repeat it.
necessary endings.
Necessary Endings. Okay. Wow. Sounds heavy. Well,
Yeah.
sounds
it's
heavy.
it's more business related than it is personal, so it's not
Okay.
it's not quite as heavy as it sounds, but it definitely ties in well.
Got it. And we're going to revisit this last question. I know you sort of answered it earlier. What is keeping you up at night?
Yeah, good question. I'm asked this one a lot too. I want to see us do better. Yeah, I think it's more kind of just the world in general. You and I have some text messages and conversations from time to time, but there's just too much opportunity out there, too much good out there for all the challenges that we kind of create and have to battle through on a consistent basis. So as you look at, the world and macroeconomics of things and what's going on around the country and the world right now, man, there's just not enough time for some of the battles that we're fighting and some of the challenges that we face. So I feel like again, kind of back to that collaboration and transparency, we could all do a lot better, I think, if we worked a little bit better together. So the lack of collaboration and transparency is probably what keeps me up at night, and unwillingness, and I'm really talking strictly professional approach, the unwillingness of some folks to have that conversation and build that rapport and that relationship on, more than just a beer or a bourbon at the end of the night, right? But on, really important strategies and processes and integration and things like that. That's probably what keeps me up at night, because if we could sit down at a drawing board and map things out, it wouldn't take very long to make some serious strides in any facet of life that you want to name. So,
Sure. All right. Very last question. What restaurant in Elkhart is a can't miss restaurant? Where people coming to Elkhart for the first time, what do they have to try when they're out there?
gosh, there's one thing I love about Elkhart and the part of the world we live in is there's so many privately owned establishments, which is always my go-to if you can find a hole in the wall or locally owned. But I guess I'll give two for the sake of long-term friends and establishments I frequent. Essence and Brad Caniff and what he's doing over there right now has been fantastic, and appreciative of him and Chef Juan and what they have going on there. And then got to give a shout out to Kurt Janowski and Navar Group and Artisan just down the street there in downtown Elkhart as well. I think the reason I say both is, I'm an Elkhart County person. I grew up here, and I remember when we had two incredible steakhouses, Fly Traps and Casey's, and they got wiped out by the 0809 financial crisis. So I know it's a competitive world out there, but having a couple of great restaurants downtown and kind of revitalizing that and rebuilding what that looks like is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Now, again, I think I mentioned this at the top of the podcast, but when my first time venturing out to Elkhart, I was expecting this sort of small, sleepy town, and the dining options would be, I don't know, like a Cracker Barrel. No disrespect to Cracker Barrel, but I was absolutely blown away by the spots that you've taken me to every single time. They're absolutely phenomenal. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Elkhart. Guys, if you're in Chicago and want to get away for the weekend, want to check out an absolutely beautiful spot, there's this river that runs down Route 22, but go check out Elkhart. Go check out Robert Weed. Say hi to Will when you're out there. Will, always such a pleasure to hang out with you. I hope we get to do dinner again soon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, Irvin, thanks for having me. Appreciate the time and the opportunity.
All right, I'll see you soon.